A small town where children vanish without a trace. A family moving into a house with a dark past. A neighbor hiding secrets deeper than his rose garden's soil. What police found in his basement will shock you. Why did he take children but never hurt them? And most importantly, where is Jacob if it wasn't him? Watch till the end. The twist will blow your mind. Smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the terrifying update to this story. Can you solve the mystery before the final reveal? The U-Haul truck groaned to a stop in front of 217 Elmwood Drive, its tires crunching over dead leaves strewn across the cracked pavement. David Carter killed the engine and exhaled, his breath fogging the windshield. For a moment, he just sat there, gripping the wheel, staring at the two-story colonial looming ahead. The house was older than the photos had suggested. Peeling paint, sagging porch steps, a gnarled oak tree casting long skeletal shadows over the roof. "We can make it work," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. Next to him, Lisa unbuckled her seatbelt with a quiet click. She didn't say anything, but David caught the way her fingers lingered on the door handle, hesitating. 5 years. 5 years since Jacob vanished from a crowded park in broad daylight, and this was their first real attempt at moving on. A fresh start, a new town where no one would whisper behind their backs or give them those hollow, pitying looks. In the back seat, 12-year-old Mia pressed her forehead against the window, her breath leaving a small circle of fog on the glass. "It's big," she said, her voice flat. David forced a smile. "Lots of room for your art stuff, huh?" Mia didn't answer. The front door of the neighboring house creaked open, and an elderly man stepped onto the porch, wiping his hands on a checkered dish towel. He had a grandfatherly face, soft wrinkles, wire-rimmed glasses, a faded flannel shirt tucked into belted khakis. When he spotted them, he lifted a hand in a slow, friendly wave. Lisa returned the gesture automatically, but David felt the tension in her shoulders. Strangers still made her nervous. "Guess we should unload before it gets dark," David said, pushing open his door. The air smelled of damp earth and distant chimney smoke. As they hauled boxes inside, the house greeted them with groaning floorboards and the faint metallic scent of old pipes. The previous owners had left in a hurry, a fact the realtor had glossed over with a tight smile. A coffee stain darkened the living room carpet. A single, forgotten sneaker, too small to be an adult's, lay abandoned in the hallway closet. Mia stood in the center of her new bedroom, arms crossed. "This place feels weird." Lisa paused, a stack of sheets in her arms. "It's just old, sweetheart. We'll clean it up, make it ours." But David noticed the way his daughter's eyes kept darting toward the closet door, slightly ajar. The way she took a step back when the floor creaked under her feet. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the oak branches against the roof. Somewhere deep in the house, maybe the basement, maybe the walls, something sighed, a whisper of air or something else. David told himself it was just the settling of an old house. He almost believed it. The scent of cinnamon and sugar curled through the screen door before the knock even came. Lisa paused, her hands still wrapped around a stack of plates she'd been unpacking. The kitchen was half lit by the afternoon sun, dust motes swirling in the golden haze. For a moment, she didn't move. 5 years of practiced suspicion tightened her grip on the porcelain. Knock, knock. David was upstairs assembling Mia's bed, the rhythmic thud of his hammer echoing through the empty halls. Lisa set the plates down carefully, wiped her palms on her jeans, and forced her feet toward the door. Through the mesh of the screen, she saw him, the man from next door. Up close, he was older than she'd thought, his face a roadmap of deep-set wrinkles, his white hair combed neatly to the side. He held a pie dish in his hands, the lattice crust perfectly golden, steam still rising in delicate tendrils. "Afternoon," he said, his voice a warm rasp. "Figured you folks could use a proper welcome to Elmwood." Lisa hesitated, her fingers brushing the doorframe. Too friendly? Too soon? But then Mia appeared at the foot of the stairs, drawn by the smell, her eyes flickering with something almost like curiosity. It was the first spark of interest Lisa had seen in her daughter's face since they'd left their old life behind. She unlatched the screen door. "Thank you," Lisa said, accepting the pie. The dish was warm against her palms. "That's very kind. Walter Graham," he said, tipping an imaginary hat. "Lived here going on 30 years now. You're the Carters, right?" Lisa nodded. "Lisa. And this is Mia." Mia hovered behind her, silent, but her gaze lingered on the pie. Walter's smile deepened, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "Apple," he said. "My late wife's recipe. Wins blue ribbons at the county fair, or it used to." There was a pause, just a beat too long before he added, "She's been gone near a decade now." Something in his tone made Lisa's throat tighten. Grief recognized grief. David's footsteps thudded down the stairs. "Everything okay?" Walter straightened slightly. "Just introducing myself. Didn't mean to interrupt your unpacking." "No, no," David said, wiping sawdust from his hands. His smile was easier than Lisa's, but she saw the way his shoulders stayed tense, the way his eyes flicked to Mia, then back to Walter. Old habits. "We appreciate it. This neighborhood seems quiet." "Quiet's the word for it," Walter chuckled. He gestured toward his property where a riot of rose bushes bloomed along the fence line, their petals a deep, velvety red. "Most excitement I get these days is pruning those damn thorns. You're welcome to some cuttings, if you'd like. Brighten the place up." Lisa glanced at their own yard, overgrown, patchy, a single rusted swing set left by the previous owners. "That'd be nice," she said, because it was easier than admitting she didn't want to plant roots here. "Not yet. Maybe not ever." Walter nodded, rocking back on his heels. "Well, I'll let you folks get settled. If you need anything, extra tools, recommendations for the hardware store, I'm just next door." As he turned to leave, Mia finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did your wife really win blue ribbons?" Walter paused. For a fraction of a second, his smile faltered. Then, softer. "Every year, kiddo. Every single year." The screen door clicked shut behind him. David exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Seems harmless enough." Lisa looked down at the pie, its sweet aroma filling the space between them. She thought about the way Walter's knuckles had looked. Gnarled, scarred, like they'd seen decades of hard work. The kind of hands that could build things. Or bury them. "Yeah," she murmured, "it seems that way." Outside, the roses swayed in the breeze, their petals bleeding into the twilight. The furnace kicked on with a metallic groan, sending a shudder through the floorboards beneath Mia's feet. She froze, her fingers tightening around the last box of art supplies. The sound came from below, from the basement. "It's just the house settling," she told herself. "Just the pipes." But the hairs on the back of her neck stood up anyway. "Mom!" Mia called, her voice echoing through the empty hallway. "Did you hear that?" From the kitchen, Lisa's reply was distracted, muffled by the clatter of dishes. "Hear what, sweetie?" Mia swallowed. The basement door stood slightly ajar at the end of the hall, a slice of darkness peeking through. The realtor had called it a spacious cellar, but all Mia saw was a gaping mouth. "Nothing," she muttered. She set the box down on her bedroom floor, her bedroom though it still didn't feel like hers, and stared at the half-finished sketch on her desk. A face. Jacob's face, or what she could remember of it. She'd been 6 when he disappeared. Memories faded. A soft thump from below. Mia's breath hitched. This time it wasn't the furnace. It was too deliberate. Too alive. She crept back into the hallway, her sock silent on the hardwood. The basement door loomed. From behind her, late afternoon sunlight spilled through the living room windows, painting the walls orange, but the hallway ahead was swallowed by shadows. Click. The sound was faint but unmistakable, like a latch releasing. Mia's pulse hammered in her throat. "Dad!" she called louder this time. David appeared at the top of the stairs, wiping his hands on a rag. "What's up, kiddo?" "There's a noise in the basement." He frowned, glancing toward the door. "Probably just the water heater. Old houses make all kinds of sounds. But it—" "Tell you what," he said, ruffling her hair. "I'll check it out tomorrow, okay? Right now I've got to finish putting your bed together before it gets dark." Mia opened her mouth to argue, but the words died in her throat. She knew that tone. The "we're not doing this again" tone. The one he used every time she thought she saw Jacob in a crowd or heard whispers in the vents at their old apartment. "You're imagining things," their eyes always said. "Let it go." But as her dad walked away, Mia turned back to the basement door. The darkness seemed to pulse. Then a whisper, faint, garbled, like a voice through water. "Help!" Mia stumbled back, her shoulder hitting the wall. The sound was gone as quickly as it came, leaving only the hum of the refrigerator and the distant tap, tap, tap of Walter Graham's pruning shears next door. Her hands shook. That night, as she lay in her half-assembled bed, Mia kept her flashlight on. The basement door was closed now, locked after she'd begged her dad to at least do that much. But through the floorboards, deep beneath the house, something scratched. Slow, deliberate, like fingers dragging across concrete. The park had smelled like popcorn and sunscreen. Lisa could still close her eyes and see it. The too bright afternoon sun, the squeak of swing chains, the way Jacob's red sneakers kicked up wood chips as he raced toward the jungle gym. 6 years old, grinning over his shoulder at her, his gap-toothed smile framed by a smear of chocolate ice cream. "Watch me, Mom." She'd blinked just for a second to dig her phone out of her purse. A text from David, running late. Be there in 20. When she looked up, the jungle gym was empty. Jacob! At first, she wasn't worried. He'd probably wandered to the duck pond or the concession stand. But then her calls grew louder, her steps faster, her pulse a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. Other parents joined the search. A lifeguard whistled for everyone to stop, to look. The police found his baseball cap near the parking lot. No fingerprints but his own. No witnesses. No screams. Just gone. Now, in the dim glow of the bathroom mirror, Lisa pressed her palms against the cool porcelain sink and forced herself to breathe. 5 years. 5 years of flyers fading on telephone poles, of detectives with sympathetic voices and empty promises, of David throwing himself into work like if he moved fast enough, he could outrun the grief. A soft knock at the door. "Mom?" Mia's voice, small through the wood. "I can't sleep." Lisa wiped her face quickly before opening the door. Mia stood there, clutching Mr. Bubbles, the stuffed whale Jacob had won for her at a carnival 2 weeks before he disappeared. Its blue fabric was worn thin from years of clutching. "Bad dream?" Lisa asked, smoothing Mia's hair. Mia shook her head. "I keep thinking about the basement." Lisa's stomach tightened. "Not this again." "Honey, we talked about this. It's just—" "Not the sounds," Mia interrupted. She hesitated, then held out a small, dirt-streaked object. "I found this behind the washing machine." A plastic army man. Green paint chipped, one arm melted slightly as if it had been near fire. Lisa's breath caught. It was Jacob's. She'd know it anywhere. He'd carried the same set in his pocket for months before he vanished, staging elaborate battles in the bathtub. But that meant— no. Impossible. "Where exactly did you find this?" Lisa heard herself ask, her voice strangely calm. Mia's eyes were too old for her face. "Behind the dryer. But, Mom, it was in a spot." "What kind of spot?" "Like someone put it there." A chill crawled up Lisa's spine. The basement had been empty when they moved in. The realtor had said so. The previous owners took everything, except this one. Tiny plastic soldier, hidden where no one would casually find it. From downstairs, the furnace kicked on with a thud. Both of them flinched. Lisa closed her fingers around the toy, the plastic edges biting into her palm. 5 years. 5 years of dead ends. And now this, here, in this house where the basement whispered and the neighbor brought pies with practiced smiles. "Go back to bed," she whispered, tucking the toy into her pocket. "I'll take care of it." But as she watched Mia pad back to her room, Lisa's other hand was already pulling out her phone. The search history was still open. Previous owners, 217. Elmwood. Why did they leave? The screen glowed in the dark, unanswered. The basement light flickered when Mia flipped the switch, casting jagged shadows across the concrete floor. She hesitated at the top of the stairs, her fingers gripping the railing until her knuckles turned white. The air smelled damp and metallic, like wet pennies and old soil. "It's just a basement," she told herself. "Just a stupid, creepy basement." But the plastic army man burned a hole in her pocket. She took the steps one at a time, each creak of the wood making her heart jump. The single bulb overhead buzzed like an angry insect, doing little to push back the darkness pooling in the corners. The washing machine sat against the far wall, its dented white surface streaked with rust. That's where she'd found the soldier. Behind it, tucked in the narrow space between the machine and the wall, like someone had dropped it there on purpose. Mia crouched, her knees popping. The concrete was cold through her jeans. She pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom. Dust motes swirled in the light as she leaned closer to the gap behind the dryer. Something glinted. Her breath hitched. A small red toy car, the kind from a grocery store vending machine, lay on its side, half buried in a layer of grime. Mia reached for it, her fingers brushing against something else. A scrap of fabric. Faded blue. She yanked her hand back as if burned. That wasn't just any fabric. It was denim. Tiny, the size of a child's jeans. The flashlight trembled in her grip as she aimed it deeper into the crevice. More debris lurked in the shadows. A broken crayon, a plastic bead, a single white shoelace. Footsteps creaked above her. "Mia!" Her dad's voice echoed down the stairwell. "You down here?" She shoved the car and fabric into her pocket just as the basement door swung open fully, flooding the space with yellow light from the hallway. David stood at the top of the stairs, his silhouette framed by the doorway. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice tight. Mia stood too fast, her head swimming. "Nothing, just thought I dropped something." David's eyes flicked to the space behind the washer, then back to her face. He didn't believe her. She could tell by the way his jaw worked, the way his fingers tapped against his thigh, a nervous habit he'd developed after Jacob vanished. "You shouldn't be down here alone," he said finally. Mia nodded, climbing the stairs. As she passed him, she caught the way his gaze lingered on the basement, the way his throat moved when he swallowed, like he was afraid of what might be looking back. Upstairs, Mia locked her bedroom door. She emptied her pockets onto the bed. The army man, the red car, the scrap of denim. The car's wheels were clogged with dirt. When she turned it over, her stomach dropped. Scratched into the plastic underside were 2 letters, J.C. Jacob Carter. Her hands shook as she picked up the fabric. It was stiff with age, the edges frayed. And there, near the hem, a brownish stain. Mia's vision blurred. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard groaned. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the branches of the oak tree against her window. The pieces didn't make sense. They couldn't, because if these were Jacob's things, how did they end up in a house they'd never lived in before? The house groaned at 3:17 a.m. Mia lay rigid in bed, her fingers twisted in the sheets. The digital clock's red glow painted jagged shadows across her ceiling. Another creak echoed through the floorboards, not the usual settling of an old house, but something heavier, deliberate. Step, drag, step, like someone favoring their left leg. Her breath fogged in the cold air. The heating had kicked off hours ago, but this chill was different. Damp, clinging, seeping up from below, from the basement. Across the hall, her parents' door remained shut. They'd stopped hearing things years ago. Or maybe they'd just stopped admitting they did. Step, drag, step. Closer now. Mia squeezed her eyes shut, counting heartbeats. It's nothing. It's just the pipes. Just the... A thud rattled the vent near her floor. She bolted upright, Mr. Bubbles tumbling to the ground. The house fell silent again, holding its breath. The only sound was the frantic hammering of her pulse in her ears. Then a whisper, faint, garbled. Me. She wasn't imagining it. David woke to frantic knocking. "Dad! Dad!" He lurched upright, disoriented, his t-shirt sticking to his chest. The bedroom door flew open before he could answer, revealing Mia silhouetted in the hallway light, her face pale, her breathing ragged. "There's someone in the basement," she gasped. Lisa stirred beside him, blinking against the sudden light. "What's wrong?" Mia's hands trembled. "I heard them. They said my name." David was already swinging his legs out of bed, grabbing the baseball bat leaning against the nightstand. 5 years ago, he would have dismissed this. 5 years ago, he still believed in coincidences. Now, he knew better. The hallway floor was icy under his bare feet as he followed Mia to her room. The house was silent now, the only sound the wind rattling the oak branches outside. "From the vent," Mia whispered, pointing. David crouched, pressing his ear to the cold metal. Nothing. He moved to the hallway vent, then the bathroom. "All quiet. It stopped when I came to get you," Mia said, her voice small. Lisa appeared in the doorway, her robe pulled tight around her. Maybe it was the wind. David met her eyes over Mia's head. They'd had this conversation before, in motel rooms, in therapists' offices. In the hushed dark of their bedroom after Mia finally fell asleep. She's grieving. She's traumatized. She's just a kid. But the toy car hidden in his dresser drawer, the one with Jacob's initials, burned in his mind. "I'll check the basement," he said. The basement light flickered when he turned it on. David descended slowly, the bat gripped tight in his hands. The air smelled of mildew and something sharper. Copper, maybe. Old metal. His phone flashlight cut through the shadows, revealing the washer and dryer, the stacks of unpacked boxes, the cobwebbed corners. Nothing moved. He checked behind the appliances, the beam of light catching on dust bunnies and a single forgotten sock. No toy cars, no scraps of denim, just empty space. A draft licked at his ankles, coming from the far wall. David moved closer, running his hand along the concrete. A crack, barely visible, let in a whisper of cold air from somewhere. The crawl space. The foundation. As he straightened, his light caught something on the floor, a smudge in the dust. He crouched for a better look. A footprint. Small. Barely larger than Mia's. David's breath left him in a rush. He staggered back, his heel knocking against something metal. A drain cover, slightly askew. Beneath it, darkness. And from that darkness, the faintest sound. Scratch. 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 Like fingernails on concrete. The morning sunlight did nothing to warm Lisa as she stood at the edge of their property, staring at the wilted rose bushes Walter Graham had promised would brighten the place up. The petals curled inward now, brown at the edges, as if the very soil beneath them was poisoned. A rustling came from the neighboring yard. "You'll want to dig those up, dear." The voice was paper-thin, crackling with age. Lisa turned to see a hunched figure leaning over the chain-link fence. A woman so ancient her skin looked like crumpled tissue paper stretched over bone. Her milky eyes gleamed with unnatural alertness. "Mrs. Wilkes," Lisa said, forcing a polite smile. The name came to her suddenly. Walter had mentioned her once. The roses were a gift from Mr. Graham. The old woman's knotted fingers tightened around the fence. Walter always did like pretty things that hide their thorns. She leaned closer, the scent of mothballs and peppermint washing over Lisa. "You know why you got that house so cheap, don't you? A chill crawled up Lisa's spine. The market was the Hendersons left in the middle of the night. Mrs. Wilkes's voice dropped to a whisper. Left, everything. Dishes in the sink. Toys on the floor. Police found their dog locked in the basement 3 days later. Starved, half to death. Lisa's mouth went dry. Why are you telling me this? The old woman's gaze flicked to Mia's window, where a shadow moved behind the curtains. Because little girls shouldn't play where the walls whisper back. A car door slammed down the street, making them both jump. Walter Graham stood by his mailbox, squinting in their direction. Mrs. Wilkes straightened abruptly, her spine popping audibly. "Be careful who you trust," she murmured, already shuffling away. "This street has buried more secrets than bodies." Lisa wanted to ask more, but the old woman moved with surprising speed, disappearing into her weathered blue house just as Walter started toward them, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Morning, Lisa," he called, his voice too cheerful. "Everything all right over here?" Lisa glanced back at her own house, where Mia's face now pressed against the upstairs window. Behind her, barely visible in the gloom of the hallway, stood a shadowy figure that looked startlingly like a small boy. When she blinked, it was gone. "Fine," Lisa lied, her fingers digging into her palms. "Everything's just fine." The digital clock burned 2:47 a.m. into Mia's retinas when the scraping sound began. She crept to the window, her breath fogging the glass as she wiped away condensation with her sleeve. Moonlight painted the backyard in monochrome. The skeletal oak, the rotting swing set, the neat rows of Walter Graham's rose bushes just beyond the chain-link fence. And there he was. Walter knelt in the dirt, his flannel shirt glowing pale in the gloom, his movements rhythmic. Dig, scoop, toss. The garden spade flashed silver with each motion. Mia's fingers tightened around the windowsill. He wasn't planting, he was burying. A rectangular object. Too small to be a person. She refused to let her mind go there. But too large for a pet. Lay wrapped in burlap beside him. Walter paused to wipe his brow, then glanced furtively toward his house before resuming his work. Dig, scoop, toss. Mia's phone lay charging across the room. She should wake her parents. She should. But the memory of her father's exhausted face when he'd returned from the basement last night stopped her. "Nothing there, kiddo, just pipes." The floorboard creaked as she shifted her weight. Walter's head snapped up. Mia ducked, her heart hammering against her ribs. When she dared peek again, he was staring directly at her window, the spade gripped like a weapon in his gnarled hands. 1 second, 2. Then, a smile. Slow, deliberate, like he'd been expecting her. Mia scrambled back, her socked feet slipping on the hardwood. She didn't breathe again until she heard the distant thunk of a Walter's back door closing. Morning light revealed a fresh patch of disturbed earth near Walter's prized roses, the soil dark and damp against the surrounding dryness. From her bedroom window, Mia watched him putter around the garden as if nothing had happened, whistling while he watered the very spot he'd dug up hours before. "Mom?" Mia hovered in the kitchen doorway as Lisa scrubbed the same clean plate for the 3rd time. "What do you think Mr. Graham grows in his garden?" Lisa's hands stilled. "Roses, sweetheart. You've seen them." "Only roses?" The plate clattered into the drying rack. "Why do you ask?" Mia chewed her lip. She could still see that smile in the moonlight, the way his teeth had glinted. "I saw him digging last night, burying something." The words sat heavy on her tongue, but Lisa's phone buzzed before she could speak, a reminder for Jacob's memorial service next week. The way her mother's face crumpled for just a second before smoothing into that practiced calm made Mia swallow her confession. "Never mind," Mia muttered, grabbing an apple from the bowl. She waited until Lisa was absorbed in laundry before slipping outside. The late September air carried the scent of decaying leaves as Mia edged along the property line, pretending to examine dandelions while inching closer to Walter's fence. The freshly turned earth smelled richer here, almost metallic. Mia crouched, plucking a twig to poke at the soil. "Find anything interesting?" Walter's voice sent her stumbling back. He stood barely 3 feet away, a pair of pruning shears dangling from one hand. Up close, his gardening gloves were stained an unsettling reddish-brown. Mia's throat tightened. "Just looking at your roses." "Ah." Walter knelt beside the disturbed patch, his knees popping. "This here's a new hybrid, very delicate." His gloved fingers brushed the soil tenderly. "Needs special nutrients to grow." Something pale peeked through the dirt where he'd touched, a sliver of white that didn't look like any fertilizer Mia had ever seen. "Bone? Shouldn't you be in school?" Walter asked suddenly, his gaze sharp behind the glasses. Mia backed away. "Homeschool day. Is that so?" He smiled again, the same slow smile from last night. "Well then, maybe you'd like to help me in the garden sometime." It wasn't an offer, it was a test. Mia was running before she realized her feet had moved, the apple tumbling from her hand as she hit the back porch steps. Only when she'd slammed the door behind her did she notice the dirt under her nails, and the single, blood-red rose petal stuck to her shoelace. The Maple Ridge Public Library smelled of lemon polish and yellowed paper. Lisa sat hunched in the farthest carrel, the only light coming from the green-shaded lamp overhead. Dust motes swirled around her as she carefully turned another brittle newspaper page. June 12, 2003. The headline screamed up at her, "Local boy, 7, vanishes near creek." A grainy photo showed a freckled child with a gap-toothed smile. Tyler McNamara. Last seen riding his bike near Willow Creek. No witnesses, no ransom note. Just gone. Lisa's fingers trembled as she flipped to the next article. September 18, 2009. Search continues for missing girl. Emily Santos, age 5. Disappeared from her backyard while playing with her kitten. The accompanying photo showed a police officer holding a stuffed unicorn in an evidence bag. Lisa's vision blurred. She knew that look on the parents' faces. The hollow-eyed shock, the barely contained hysteria. She'd seen it in her own mirror for 5 years. The librarian's voice made her jump. "Those are our archived microfilms." Mrs. Calloway adjusted her cat-eye glasses, peering at the dates Lisa had pulled. "Not many request these old tragedies." Lisa forced a smile. "Just personal research." The woman's gaze lingered on the articles. "You're living in the Henderson house, aren't you?" A chill crept up Lisa's spine. "How did you—" "Small town." Mrs. Calloway's smile didn't reach her eyes. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You should check the 1994 editions. That's when little Bobby Reynolds disappeared." Lisa's throat tightened. "Third one?" "Fourth." The librarian's fingers brushed the edge of the 2009 paper. "If you count the Graham boy." Ice flooded Lisa's veins. Walter Graham had a son. Died in a house fire back in '97. Such a shame. Mrs. Calloway straightened, her voice returning to normal volume. "Let me know if you need help with the microfilm reader." Lisa waited until the librarian's footsteps faded before frantically flipping through the 1997 editions. The article was brief, barely 3 paragraphs on page 6. Tragedy strikes local family. A weekend fire claimed the life of 8-year-old Samuel Graham and his mother, Margaret. Husband and father, Walter Graham, was reportedly away on business at the time. No photos, no follow-ups, just over. Lisa's pulse roared in her ears as she pieced together the timeline. 1994, Bobby Reynolds vanishes. 1997, Graham family fire. 2003, Tyler McNamara disappears. 2009, Emily Santos goes missing. 2018, the Hendersons flee. 2023, the Carters move in. And now the whispers in her basement. The toys that shouldn't exist. The neighbor who gardened at midnight. Her phone buzzed. A text from David. "Mia says she saw Walter digging in his yard last night. We need to talk." Outside, the library windows darkened as storm clouds rolled in. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled like the growl of a waking beast. Lisa gathered the articles with shaking hands. She knew now why the roses grew so red. The basement light buzzed like an angry hornet as Mia hovered at the top of the stairs, her fingers leaving damp prints on the railing. The smell hit her first. Damp earth and something sharper like the time she'd found a dead mouse behind the refrigerator in their old apartment. Her parents thought she was upstairs doing homework. They'd been arguing in hushed tones all morning after Mom returned from the library, their voices rising and falling like waves against the shore of some terrible secret. 4 children, David. 4. Mia took the first step. The wood groaned under her weight. Halfway down, she spotted it, a sliver of darkness along the far wall where the concrete met the foundation. Not a crack. Too straight for that. An edge. The flashlight on her phone trembled as she approached. Up close, she could see the outline, a door barely taller than she was, its seams camouflaged to blend with the cinder blocks. The handle was missing, just a small hole where one should be. From beyond it came the faintest sound. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Mia's breath came in shallow gasps. She reached out, her fingertips brushing the cold metal. Clang. The sound echoed through the basement as something inside the door thumped against it. Mia stumbled back, her sneakers slipping on the damp concrete. The scratching intensified, frantic now, joined by a muffled whimpering that raised the hairs on her arms. Not animal, human. She was halfway up the stairs when the basement light flickered out. In the sudden darkness, the door creaked open. David's fist pounded on Walter Graham's front door hard enough to rattle the porch light. 3 hours. 3 goddamn hours since Mia had vanished after saying she was just checking something in the basement. The door creaked open to reveal Walter, his flannel shirt neatly buttoned, gardening gloves still on. David? David shoved past him into the house. The air smelled of potpourri and something underneath. Chemical. Sharp. Like cleaning products masking rot. Where's my daughter? Walter's eyebrows knitted together. I haven't seen Mia since the garage. David spotted the interior door, the only one with a shiny new deadbolt. Why's this locked, Walter? A flicker in the old man's eyes. Tools are dangerous for... David shoulder-checked the door, the wood splintered with a satisfying crack. The motion-activated garage light flickered on, revealing a workbench lined with mason jars full of teeth, a corkboard with newspaper clippings about each missing child, and on the floor, near a drain, Mia's purple hair tie. But what stopped David's heart was the far wall. Dozens of shoes. Children's shoes. Neatly arranged by size on a shelf, each pair labeled with a name and date. Tyler's light-up sneakers, Emily's sparkly sandals, and, in the center, a tiny pair of red Converse that hadn't been made in over a decade. Jacob's. Walter's voice came from behind him, eerily calm. You should have left well enough alone. David turned just in time to see the shovel swinging toward his head. The world came back in flashes of pain and blurry streetlights. David groaned, tasting copper, his fingers finding the warm stickiness at his temple. The shovel lay nearby, its edge smeared red. Walter was gone. So was Mia's hair tie. David staggered to his feet, the garage spinning around him. Through the broken door, he spotted Walter's silhouette darting across the backyard toward the dense tree line bordering Hollow Oaks Park. Lisa! David's voice tore through the night as he stumbled into the kitchen where his wife was frantically calling the police. He's running. Toward the woods. Lisa's face went pale. The park. That's where Emily Santos was last seen. They moved as one. David grabbing a flashlight, Lisa snatching the butcher knife from the block. The night air slapped them awake as they burst outside, their beams cutting through the swirling mist rising from the damp earth. Walter moved unnaturally fast for an old man, his footsteps crunching through the underbrush ahead. David's light caught glimpses of him weaving between the oaks. Flannel flashing between tree trunks, the glint of something metal in his hand. He's heading for the creek, Lisa gasped. Then they heard it, a high-pitched scream slicing through the darkness. Mia. David plunged into the blackness, branches whipping at his face. The flashlight beam bounced wildly, illuminating flashes of the nightmare. A child's sneaker half buried in leaves, frayed ropes dangling from a low branch. And there, by the rotting footbridge, Walter dragging a kicking, screaming Mia toward the water. "Let her go!" David's roar startled even himself. Walter spun, his face a grotesque mask of fury and something else. Fear. The moonlight glinted off the garden shears in his hand as he pressed them to Mia's throat. "You don't understand," Walter panted. "I saved them. From the fire. From the pain. Like I couldn't save Sammy." A blur of movement to the left. Lisa emerged from the reeds like an avenging ghost, the butcher knife flashing down. Thunk. The shears tumbled into the creek as Walter howled, clutching his bleeding forearm. Mia wrenched free, scrambling toward David as Walter stumbled backward onto the unstable footbridge. The old wood groaned, snapped. Walter's scream was cut short by the icy water swallowing him whole. For 3 heartbeats the creek flowed silent and dark. Then, downstream, a gasp and frantic splashing as Walter surfaced, just in time to see the flashing blue lights of police cruisers pulling up on the bank, officers shouting as they spotted the bloodied man struggling in the current. Lisa collapsed to her knees, clutching Mia so tight the girl squeaked. David's hands shook as he aimed the flashlight at the water, where Walter's thrashing form was being dragged toward the shore by a deputy. The beam caught something else, too. A small, pale face watching from between the trees on the opposite bank. A boy in soaked red sneakers, then gone. David blinked. "Did you see?" But when he looked again, there was only the whispering leaves and the cold October wind carrying Walter Graham's sobs away into the night. The police floodlights turned the basement into a surgical theater, all harsh whites and sharp shadows. Mia huddled between her parents on the bottom step, watching as Officer Delgado wedged a crowbar into the hidden door's seam. The metal shrieked in protest. "Jesus," one cop muttered as the door gave way. The smell hit first, not decay, but the cloying sweetness of air fresheners battling something earthier beneath. Detective Ruiz was the first inside, her flashlight sweeping across walls papered with photos. Hundreds of them. Polaroids of children playing in Walter's rose garden. School portraits taped in careful rows. Candid shots taken through windows. Emily Santos on her swing set. Tyler McNamara riding his bike. And in the center, a shrine. Jacob's missing poster beneath a garland of dried roses, surrounded by every newspaper clipping about the Carter family's search. Mia's stomach lurched. He'd been watching us all along. "Over here," Ruiz called. A small table held meticulous displays. Tyler's Matchbox cars, Emily's hair ribbons, Bobby Reynolds' Little League trophy, each arranged like museum exhibits beneath handwritten labels. Samuel's friends. But the worst part? The back wall. A child-sized cot with 4 sets of neatly folded pajamas, a shelf of storybooks, a nightlight shaped like a smiling sun. Prepared. Waiting. Ruiz radioed in, her voice tight. "No remains. Repeat. No human remains at this location." Lisa sagged against David, equal parts relief and horror. "Then where?" Mia's gaze drifted to the drain in the floor. The one Dad had noticed weeks ago. The one with scratch marks around its edges. Outside, thunder rumbled as the first raindrops began to fall on Walter Graham's prized roses. The interrogation room smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner. Through the one-way glass, David watched Walter Graham slump in the metal chair, his cuffed hands resting on the table, those same hands that had pruned roses and dug graves in equal measure. A Band-Aid peeked from beneath his sleeve where Lisa's knife had found its mark. Detective Ruiz slid a photograph across the table. 8-year-old Samuel Graham smiled up from his soccer portrait forever frozen in 1997. "Tell us about the children, Walter." A tremor ran through the old man's shoulders. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible over the hum of the recording equipment. "I never hurt them." His fingers brushed the photo. "After the fire. After I lost Sammy and Maggie. I'd see children playing. So happy. So alive. His breath fogged the metal table. I just wanted to borrow that light for a little while. Ruiz pushed forward another photo, Emily Santos missing since 2009. You kidnapped them. Walter's head snapped up, eyes glistening. I sheltered them, fed them homemade cookies, read them Sammy's favorite stories. His voice cracked. Then I'd leave them somewhere safe, the library, the park, where they'd be found quickly. They never even remembered the roses. Lisa's nails dug into David's arm behind the glass. Ruiz leaned in. And Jacob Carter? Walter blinked, genuine confusion wrinkling his brow. The red-headed boy from the news? No, he wasn't. His gaze drifted to some middle distance. Though I did see him that day, at the park, following a man in a blue jacket toward the parking lot. The air left David's lungs in a rush, an actual lead, after all these years. Ruiz pressed harder. Then why keep their things? Why the shrine? Walter's answer came in a whisper, so they wouldn't be forgotten, like Sammy. Behind them, the precinct door burst open. An officer hurried in, face ashen, clutching an evidence bag. Inside, a small skeletal hand protruded from freshly turned earth. Walter's rose garden had finally given up its secrets. Walter began to sob. The evidence room buzzed with fluorescent indifference as Lisa sorted through the cardboard box labeled Graham W. Personal Effects. Walter's flannel shirts still carried the faint scent of rose fertilizer and sweat. She hesitated before reaching for the battered tin at the bottom, the kind that held sewing supplies or holiday cookies. Inside, nestled between faded photographs of a smiling, dark-haired boy, Samuel, age 7, forever frozen in time, lay a single envelope. Her name stared back at her in careful cursive. Mrs. Carter. The paper crackled as she unfolded it, her breath shallow. 3 sentences. That's all it took to unravel 5 years of grief. Your son is alive. He was taken by the man in the blue jacket. Look near the trains in Chicago. No signature, just a date scribbled in the corner, 2 weeks after Jacob's disappearance. Lisa's knees buckled. The concrete wall caught her as she slid down, the letter clutched to her chest. Around her, the world narrowed to the hammering of her heart and the whisper of paper against her fingertips. Chicago. Blue jacket. Alive. The door creaked open. David stood silhouetted in the hallway light, Mia peering around his arm. They took one look at Lisa's face and knew. Mom? Mia's voice was small, hopeful in a way it hadn't been since she was 6 years old. Lisa held out the letter with trembling hands. Outside, the first snow of December began to fall, blanketing the police station parking lot in quiet white. Somewhere beyond the glass, beyond the town limits, beyond the years of searching, a boy with red hair might be waiting.